Welcome to Discover Indie Film. I'm your host, Jeff Howard, and I'm pretty honored to have filmmaker Taylor Olson with me. Hey, Taylor.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. All right, so this is going to be a fun intro for me because Taylor's film Bone Cage, of which he was the writer, director, and lead actor. It was at the Sherman Oaks Film Festival last year in 2021, and it took in, I'm going to read these carefully so I don't screw it up, 4 grand jury awards. It got Best Feature Film Drama, it got Best Actor in a Lead Role for Taylor Olson, Best Performance by a Full Cast, which I love that category. I always think, why don't the Oscars ever add a cast one? And additionally, Best Cinematography for a feature film, and that was Kevin A. Fraser. So the jury loved the film. I love the film. I often share that this is one of the ones that I watched, and then I watched again with my wife because I watch stuff as part of the selection jury. And if she's gonna love it, I'll either stop like 10 minutes in if I have that feeling, or I actually can't remember, but I remember she and I sitting in the bedroom, laptop connected to the Apple TV, watched the whole film, and she went, I can't remember her exact words, but she was like, that was an amazing film. So bravo. Applause on Bone Cage. Just absolutely fantastic. And I will stop with the superlatives, but it really is, when you watch, I'll just give myself a disclaimer, which is I do watch something like 1,200 films a year for the 2 festivals that I program.
Wow.
And so when I say something's great, I mean it. I watch a lot of stuff I don't like. It's I know I sound like a cheerleader on this podcast, but that's because I only have the good ones on here.
Well, that's very kind of you. Yeah, that's very kind.
All right. Well, I prepared you for how we'd start. I'm not going to pitch Discover Indie Film, any of the other stuff till we get to the end. So I'm really curious. I mean, you did nearly everything on this film. So what got you started in filmmaking and acting?
Well, I think like most people who end up in storytelling of any sort, whether that's film, theater, writing novels, whatever it is, right? Poetry, is that you just fall in love with stories as a kid. So I remember loving writing as a kid. But film didn't seem like an accessible thing at all. I loved movies. I was obsessed with watching films, and I'd watch the same films on repeat. But I didn't ever think about making films. And then I went to theater school out here, and I'm in Mi'kma'ki in Nova Scotia in Canada. And I went to theater school, and I was studying theater, and I thought I was just going to come into school, get my teaching degree, become like a theater drama teacher, right? Because that's what seemed accessible as a career. And then in my last year, John Dunsworth, who it was a sort of like a legend out here. He was Mr. Leahy on the Trailer Park Boys and a few other things, So he had his own sort of fame. He taught a camera acting workshop here, and he said, "No, you've got to go and act in movies. That's what you should be doing." So,
and that was high school age, like high school.
That was university.
University. Yeah, so at university, someone you respected, gave that magical positive reinforcement to actually go for it.
100%. Yeah, I was not planning on coming out of school and being an actor. I was going to be a teacher, but it was him, and he got me a couple contacts, a couple auditions for a couple non-union movies that summer, and I think because of him, I booked them both because he had he was a local legend here, and like I said, and so he really had a lot of sway, and I did those, and I acted in those films, and that's when I thought, okay, I'll give it a shot. I'll really try. And it was the way I fell into filmmaking was actually as an actor first, because I was writing roles for myself in short films and handing them to local emerging directors, and that was mostly just to be an actor at that point. And then in that process, I fell in love with writing again, like kind of how I did as a kid, and then seeing the process of the filmmaking. I found that I had a very specific vision in the writing, and I didn't realize it. I didn't realize that I was directing the movie in my head already, visually or tonally. And so I was sort of saying to a friend, the movies didn't I think they turned out great, but they didn't come out the way I imagined them. And they said, well, that's because you should be directing them. If you imagine this shot and that shot, it cuts like this and this music. And so then I started just giving it a shot and started directing short films and experimenting, all no money short films. And that's kind of how I fell into actually directing properly. And that's when I really fell in love with the scope of storytelling, and like what with cinema, what you can do with it.
Yeah, all the extra tools you get. And I guess I want to ask too, at the university level, was it mostly stage acting, or did your university also have some cameras for students to play around with?
It was all stage acting. It was a classical theater program, so it was a lot of Shakespeare and the real old classic sort of thing. And then it was just this one workshop that we had with John Dunsworth and a local casting agent here. That was it was about 4 classes. That was it for screen acting. And so when I came out of school, though, because of that experience, I was really focused on working in film right away. And yeah, I was just lucky to get started.
Yeah, I mean, I ask it almost as a leading question just because I think there is a bit of a bias among many of us that you can kind of spot. I don't know. I think stage acting really boosts what's in someone's acting wheelhouse or toolbox, whatever you want to say. Like, I think you can always spot a stage actor because their ability to make a connection with the audience, what you have to do on stage, right, is if they figure out how to make the camera their audience and just really connect with it, I think that's why people jump off the screen.
Oh, it's really interesting that you say that, because I fully agree. When I cast Bone Cage, it was pretty much everyone in the movie is a stage actor, right? And that was important because we were doing these really long takes. But there are people who have other opinions, like, oh, stage actors are too big and this and that. But I think the thing is, on stage, your expression of the truth is to fill the whole theater, whereas with the camera, the expression of the truth is just to communicate to the person opposite you and the distance to the camera. And as soon as I think stage actors understand that, all of a sudden their performances become much smaller and very full. So I was really lucky to get the cast that I did because they had that experience.
Yeah, and obviously when you're directing a stage actor with a camera, you can very quickly get them doing what needs to be done, right? Like you can, if you have to. Yeah, your cast is ridiculous. In fact, I think I'm guilty of, and it's embarrassing for someone that's been programming film festivals for like 7 years, but I almost like watching Bone Cage, which we haven't, I don't even know what kind of spoilers we want to share, but watching Bone Cage, I did that naive, silly thing of a movie viewer, but thinking like, is this these people's real lives? Like, are these like, it's so authentic. The authenticity is just so present that I was actually thinking, well, this dude must be a logger.
Oh, that's kind. That's very sweet. I mean, it's funny, like I'm not, and that's not really my world, and it hasn't been. But my family worked in the logging industry for generations. So like my dad is a heavy duty mechanic, not in the same sort of vein, but my grandfather on his side ran a wood processor like Jamie. So I had been around these clear cuts and such. And that's like a very prominent thing here in Mi'kma'ki in Nova Scotia. But a lot of the cast, don't come from that world. And so they really sort of really found a way to just like tap into something that they knew was here, that's like 45 minutes, an hour away, these communities that are sort of almost like invisible, for the most part.
For sure. And I'm sure your leadership as director and lead actor probably had a lot to do with sort of setting an example for how everything was going to be played.
Well, that's nice of you to say. I'm not, you do your best, right? You kind of dive in. And one of the things that I do like about acting and directing at the same time, because sometimes people are like, well, how do you do that? And I think actually it's a great tool for me personally coming from an acting background, because like you say, you can set the tone of the style of performance or the tone of the film just by the first couple takes that you do with another actor. And they go, oh, okay, I see what we're doing. This is kind of the thing we're going for. And that was a lot of fun, where we could sort of play together, and they knew I was in the trenches with them too. So there's nothing that I was going to ask them to do that I wasn't making myself do something worse. Like, so that was useful, I think, too, in terms of trust. And one of the great things is that we were all friends. I mean, a lot of us were friends before we made the film because it's such a small community here. So there's a lot of, that goes a long way, I think, too, when you're acting together, when you have that built relationship or trust. Like Kevin, who plays Sam, him and I did the stage version of the play first. So he was also in that version too. And so that relationship had already been built.
For sure. I guess I should ask the background question too of you keep naming your town in Nova Scotia, which I hope most people know where Nova Scotia is. I mean, I'm a Canadaphile anyway. Like my best friend I grew up with grew up in Winnipeg, and then moved to LA. So I've always been aware of Canada, and his daughter goes to University in Nova Scotia right now. So,
right.
But you want to say like how large a town it is? Like how many people live there?
So, like I personally live in Chipuktuk in Halifax, but where we shot was in Stewiacke, and this is a town. It's almost like a series of villages. You can't even really call it a town per se. There's a bunch of small series of villages that make up a town in a sense, but gosh, it's really small. Like, I mean, where we shot, not 5,000 people, not even. So it's a really small area of the woods, and definitely a lot of logging going on in that area for sure. Yeah. For
sure. Cool. Well, as long as it sounds like we're deep into Bone Cage, it's funny because I normally get a little more background, but yeah. We're good. We're good. So doing the play, I assume you played the same character?
Yeah, I played the same character, which was what a gift to actually get to play the role on stage, realize that you want to turn it into a movie, and then have all that information and background, knowing the things that you either wanted to change from your performance last time. That was a real gift.
Yeah, and the other leading question would be, or obvious question that I'm sure anyone would ask is how long did you do the play before you started, directing it in your head on screen?
It was the second rehearsal blocking that I had the thought, I think this could make an interesting film. So the play's written by Catherine Banks. She's a Governor General Award winner twice here, which is it's like one of the highest honors you can get in Canada for writing. And she won it for Bone Cage. And so her writing is really beautiful. It's really poetic, very poetic. And that was the thing that really sort of triggered the idea of seeing the images, because you could see the images that she'd created in her mind and she was gifting to us. But I'd seen the clear cuts in person, right? So I knew how devastating they really looked and felt, and I wanted the sensory experience of that. And so, yeah, it was really early on that I was seeing the clear cuts that I had seen as a kid and going, I think it would be really powerful to see the trees being cut down. Like, what would that look like? And so, day 2 of rehearsal, I was already thinking about it.
Right. You saw that story that was being told on stage could be put in a larger context or a more visual context and really obviously it drives home the subtext of all these characters.
Yeah. And the thing too was that I guess my goal throughout the whole process was always the feeling that her poetry evoked. How do I take that feeling and translate it to the visuals, so that those visuals are hopefully close to as visceral as the feeling of the poetry is. And that was kind of always the goal. Yeah.
So you did one run of the play. How long was the run for the play?
Only 2 weeks. It was 2 weekends, actually. It was like 12 shows altogether. Yeah. So it was pretty short.
Pretty short. But then as soon as it was done, did you dive in, or? Yeah,
pretty much. I mean, we hadn't finished the run of the play, and I talked to Kevin Fraser, who is the DOP, because I just acted in a short film right before I did the play with him, and he had said, let's do something together. I'd really like that, and so then immediately we started talking about this one idea, which was a short film that was maybe all going to be done in one take. That was very, sort of pulling inspiration from Thunder Road, the Jim Cummings short film, and we were talking about that. But then when this came up, and it was like, well, let's talk about this. And he was saying, how would you want to shoot it? And I was like, I think long immersive takes to capture that feeling of liveness that you get from the play. So I talked to him after the first run of shows before the next weekend. And then the day that we closed, or the second day after we closed, I went and had a coffee with Catherine and said, like, can we turn this into a movie? Yeah.
Wow, that sounds like another gift to actually be able to meet with the playwright and just directly ask about it, adapting instead of like trying to hunt down through some literary agent or something.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. And she had been there during the rehearsal process at different points for the play. She saw multiple shows. So I think one of the things was that her just knowing how close my family was to the real life experience, or that I actually knew the community was a piece of it, because I know that she was very guarded about the piece. A lot of people had asked before, a lot of people with way more experience and way more laurels and reason to make the movie. So I think I lucked out. Like, I got really lucky with Catherine, because what she cared about was how much I cared about it. And that was the most important thing to her, more than, how big is this filmmaker? How important are they? Because I'd only made short films, right? So.
Yeah, that's a wonderful story right there. Just the idea that this award-winning playwright with an award-winning play was turning down big offers from, like, I can imagine. Once a play wins awards, people start approaching you, and that she just manages to have a lunch or whatever with an actor and be like, oh, I can recognize this person will do it right. That's amazing.
Yeah, I was amazed that she actually trusted me. So yeah. Because I was like, I don't know, when I pitched her the idea of doing it, I think maybe it just turned like 25, 26 or something like that. So it was, yeah, just a kid.
But you were the perfect age, yeah, right? But Jamie, that's Jamie's age, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the film there, because it's a small community, there is such a tight-knit feeling of how everyone grew up together. Just way too close and way too many fights and way too much, too many cigarettes, too much beer, too much everything. And
exactly.
And so a 25-year-old would probably have a better take on that, I bet, than some 55-year-old experienced person like me would be like, well, I see something deeper here. Whereas like at 25, you just get it.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that, because one day Kevin and I, the DOP, were driving, and he said, like, I was saying how it was kind of crazy. We were just diving into this. I'd only made a few short films and just was a little bit nervous about that. And, as you should be, I guess, going into your first feature, being scared. I was excited, confident, and scared all at the same time. And he said, so yeah, like, I mean, if you're kind of terrified going into this, why do it now? And I said, I think in 3 years, if I wait 3 years, when it makes more sense, when, logically I'm more ready to make my first feature, all those same sort of like stirrings inside of me, that rawness, might actually have worked itself into something else. And I'm afraid that if I don't dive in now and just make the movie, that it won't be the same movie. Maybe I'll hopefully in 3 years, I'll be a much better filmmaker. I'll be more knowledgeable. I'll understand story and filmmaking more, but I don't think the movie will be as raw or the same, because I won't be. And it's funny that you say that, because that's literally what I said to him in that car ride.
That is kind of amazing. I mean, and that's that raw authenticity that I think makes it stand out for sure. And as long as you're mentioning the shorts, a couple of shorts, are you proud of them? Do you want to name them? Are they stuff that we, I didn't get too much background on you besides your quick rise through the Nova Scotia theater scene and whatnot. So before we hop into other things about Bone Cage, like, how different were the shorts?
It's interesting, because the first short film I really directed is one that is actually probably the short film that's my favorite that I've made. And it's called Cut, and it's literally searchable through YouTube. It's just online now, but it's sort of like a one take sort of, it's got a few twists in it with one take, and that was kind of the goal. And making that little like 4.5 minute short is kind of where I was like, oh, I love directing. Like, look what you can do with like very little. So yeah, I'm really proud of that. And there's a couple other shorts that I made. I did, like a little comedy called The Date, and this other film that's called Mask, that is kind of like experimenting with with the style that we used in Bone Cage, and wasn't as successful because we were just experimenting with it. But I have a hard time, as I think most people do, watching their old films because all you can see are the mistakes or the things that you've learned since. But at the same time, I have to be proud of them because we dove in with a team of like young emerging crew and cast and just made something and did our best. So I don't really cringe in that way. I cringe more of like I wish we would have done that. Well, if we did it now, we do this, right? So
that's natural. So in other words, I can hop onto YouTube and type Taylor Olson cut and find a channel with all your shorts on it.
Yeah, that one should pop up for sure. Yeah.
Cool. Well, like me, your name is not super rare, but how many Taylor Olsons have I? Anyhow,
I don't know.
So, and after you got permission from the writer, did you do everything at once? Did you? Because I think, didn't you get support, like some government support and stuff? And so that's not easy paperwork. But then you also had to actually do the adaptation, right? I mean, I assume you wrote a screenplay on it instead of just sticking to the text and like winging it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first step was, oddly enough, because the deadline was coming up quickly, the first step was for me to literally just type the words from the play into a screenplay. It was 120 something pages, and I was like, whoa, okay, this is way longer than I expected it would be in terms of a starting place. And so for my first job was just to get it down to 100 pages, because I thought, if I get it down to 100 pages, then I can apply for funding, and then I can keep working on it. So I did, and we were really lucky here. We're kind of like cursed on one side, but also extremely lucky in Canada. We have government funding, which is huge, and obviously, like a lot of places in the world don't have this, and it makes a massive difference towards getting your first features up and off the ground. The thing that's tough here is that there's really no private funding. It doesn't really exist because of all these sort of other things. So it's kind of like a two-edged sword sort of thing. I was really lucky to get something called a Talent to Watch micro-budget program, which is a first feature program through Telefilm. And so we applied with that 100-page script, and then immediately, as soon as we got it, we picked dates for, we got it in like July, and we picked dates for like next May, June. So we knew we had just under a year to get it ready. And so I dove in and started adapting the script. And right away, the first thing that I knew was that it was just too big from the play. There's too many characters. There's too many storylines, too many arcs. And so it had to just come down. And thankfully, I had Catherine actually as my story editor. So one of the agreements between us to do it was that she'd approve all the changes. And because I really respected her, I was like, yeah, that's totally cool. I totally, with another person, I might have been like, maybe it's not a good idea. But because I really respected her and knew where she was coming from, we went about it that way. And at first I just started like cutting it down, just getting it smaller. And then realizing that the structure needed to change from the play to film. Just the mediums were just different enough that it had to change. And so this sort of more ensemble piece slowly, because it was the thing that I understood too, became more and more focused on Jamie and Chicky instead of all the other characters. And it was more about them. And it just started getting smaller and more like a character study than an ensemble study. And then thankfully I just had a lot of folks who were willing to read the script along the way and give notes and keep going. So I must have done about, I think by the end it was 26 drafts or something like that of the film. And I would say about half of it, the words on the page, whether action or dialogue, is from the play still. And then about half of it is new. So it was about 50-50 by the end. Yeah, and it went from about 15 scenes to 107 or something like that. So that was the biggest piece of it, is how do you make this play a film instead of it being a play that was filmed, which... That was the tricky part. Yeah. Yeah,
for sure. And it shows. And I imagine it's probably obvious that in a play, so much more is done with dialogue because you only have so much dialogue and blocking to tell story with. Whereas you had a camera in the outdoors and a clear cut forest and the actual kind of town and and the campfire parties and everything that you really don't have the luxury of that on stage.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So honestly, it just, and I'll say, like, I wasn't amazed that when I read, because I actually make a point when I first watch a film that's been submitted to the festival, I just watch it and I don't read any of the cover letter. I don't read the bio. I just want to like approach it like just completely clean, no biases.
Right.
And I would not have guessed it was an adapted play because it just reminds me of just the great films where you just take a deep dive into a community that is, underrepresented, that you never see on screen. It makes me think of a lot of films that I love where, it just starts with someone's career and, whether it's Secrets and Lies and you watch an ophthalmologist working for like the first 5 minutes but it's compelling because how often do you see an ophthalmologist in a film?
Yeah, exactly.
Or like Yuli's Gold, where like it's like 10 minutes of him like working up the honey or getting the
Totally.
like it just takes you somewhere that you never get to go because I might have worked with a Hollywood producer or two, and whenever a lead character would have a job like say an engineer or accountant, they'd be like, shouldn't it be something glamorous?
Right.
like they think it to be on screen, someone's career has to be glamorous. So yeah, Bone Cage just feels like pure cinema. It feels like a film. But then you read and see, oh, it's based on an award-winning play, so you just did this brilliant adaptation of it that fully made it cinema.
Well, thanks. That's very kind of you. It's funny that to go back to what you were saying before about the job thing. One of the things that that always fascinated me about There Will Be Blood, for example, is how the first, I don't even know how many minutes of it, like it's got to be almost 15 minutes or something like that, right?
I think it's like 20 something.
Is it 20 something? Where it's
without
just,
a word, right?
No words, just watching them do the job. And it's incredibly compelling. So that idea of just being immersed in someone's world that you don't know, I totally agree. It's really interesting. And it's funny because we really wanted, this budget was so small. By the time we were done, it was $175,000, which is like, it's enough to make a movie. But especially like this movie on this scale, it was like we were really stretching things because this movie does have like, even though it's intimate, it does have like a number of locations and actors and stunts or things, right? And so we really wanted to actually do a bit more of him on the job. And on the 2 days that we had to shoot the wood processor stuff, I was supposed to work it for a little while, but we got later into the day and we were falling behind, so I didn't get to do it. But the plan was to see me actually working the wood processor, and that would have been, that's one of the things that you go, oh, we could only had another half a day, right? Yeah.
Nothing was lost, man, because you see the you see the cutting, and you see the wood processor, and that alone is a fascinating, huge piece of machinery. Just I'm sure I don't watch those how it's made type videos, but I'm sure, or TV series, but I'm sure there's stuff that it's just so fascinating to watch. And then to see you climb out of the cab, I was sold. I thought you did it.
So that's great to hear.
Filmmaking, the magic of filmmaking worked there for sure. And I imagine, okay, so another assumption I have is that in a small town / series of villages where you're shooting, I mean, you got a beautiful bridge, you have all these things. It probably, with your budget, it probably was the perfect place to shoot with that budget, because I doubt the community was like, well, why didn't you throw $1,000 at me to shoot in front of my building? Like, I bet you didn't have to deal with what people deal with in bigger cities.
Totally, yeah. Like, the biggest thing that we had to deal with was getting the permit for the bridge. It took us about 4.5 months to get to the right people because it's so small. It's like we talked to one person, they're like, oh, you got to talk to somebody over in this county, or you got to talk. And so we're just like kind of circling around. But once we finally got a hold of them, they're like, yeah, go ahead. All you got to do is, so basically for the bridge, for example, all we had to do was get traffic control. So we had traffic control. The crazy thing was that we could only be on the bridge holding traffic for like 7 minutes or something like that. And some of those takes on the bridge are like upwards of 3.5 minutes just themselves. So that was some of the crazier things that we had to deal with when we like pull everybody off in between takes, is like we let traffic go and then go, okay, great, we're allowed to hold them. All right, run over, and then line up. All right, action, go. But the communities there were so supportive, and the people were so just excited to see, oh, a movie's being shot out here instead of in the city. Yeah,
For sure, man. I admit I was waiting for you to, because I mean, some of the stuff on the bridge is a little scary.
yeah.
And your only hassle wasn't that you were. I'm sure you did everything very safely, but it doesn't look as safe as you made it look unsafe at times. But your main thing was traffic flow. You didn't have to worry about like the community, some county clerk saying, "Oh no, you can't. That's too risky. We can't risk someone getting hurt on our bridge."
No, they were totally cool with it. There's a big stunt near the end. I don't want to give it away for anyone who hasn't watched, but we built a mini platform for the bridge for the very end of the film. I think I know you probably know what I'm talking about, but that we built that whole thing, so that was all fake. So that was entirely fake platform that was not nearly as high, and then I was rigged and strapped in and everything, and so it was totally safe. Because we're working with ACTRA, which is like our version of SAG. We have to like have a stunt coordinator, have rigging guys, all this kind of stuff. So that was the other piece with the traffic controls. When we did that giant stunt at the end with the fake bridge, we had scaffolding that would have to come apart a little bit. Like half of it would have to come apart. We'd have to take it off while we let traffic go by, come back, put it back together, get me back up there, and then we could shoot the take. And then if the traffic came again, we have to do it again. So that was the only thing with that. But in fact, I think it made it more fun, and there was more adrenaline on the day because it was a bit of chaos in that way.
Well, if we had the ability to have it on screen at the theater and have everybody come out, and I just would have loved. I'm sure other filmmakers would have looked at Bone Cage, and when you talked about what you pulled off with your budget, it might have been you just would have had a theater full of. You would have had a theater full of filmmakers going, "I can't believe you pulled that off," because you don't look. It doesn't look or feel budgetarily limited at all. And here you did things with scaffoldings and this and that. Like it's you had nearly a year to do it, but you absolutely got the best bang for the buck I can imagine.
Well, thanks. I really appreciate that. That was one of our goals, is just to get all the money on screen and into our crew's pockets, and that was it. Just sort of, and then go to get there, make our movie. Which how many people actually get to make their movies? That's pretty lucky.
Most don't.
Exactly. Yeah.
I can't even pull a number out of my ass that would guess at how many people are walking around with maybe a really good movie in their head or on paper, and it's just even to get off the ground to do a proof of concept short isn't going to happen.
100%. Yeah. Exactly.
So was it was in order to get it done at that budget? Was it actually a fairly quick shoot?
It was pretty quick. It was 16 days. So, I guess pretty standard for low budget features, usually like 15 or 16 days, I guess. But one of the things that, Kevin and I talked about really early on was the fact that we're going to have to shoot it in like 15 days. We got 16. And we realized pretty quickly in prep that this idea of shooting these longer takes, that was like a stylistic choice before thinking about time. We realized, if we actually do that pretty well and we prep really well, and then I have time to rehearse with the actors. I had 3 days of rehearsal with the actors, and one of those days was with Kevin. So all the stuff that was shot inside the house, we got to rehearse all those scenes with the camera. And so that went a long way in terms of time. And we'd actually end up with so many days early on, we'd get to hour 9 and go, well, I guess we're going to be done in 30 minutes. We should pull up that scene and make sure that next week's not so bad. And we ended up doing that a whole bunch on the first week. And we would do these like 10-hour days for like the first 5 days, but we ended up pulling 7 or 8 scenes up because of the style of shooting, where we weren't doing a ton of coverage. It was really planned out and carefully rehearsed, to the point that when we came in, the actors were ready. Kevin had a pretty good idea what it would be. And yeah, it would take us like 8 or 9 takes to get it sometimes. But even that, in comparison to doing that and then 4 more sets of coverage, actually gave us the time to do it, you know, kind of as well as we felt we could in the moment, on this quick schedule and with little money.
All right, I have 2 reactions I can't hold back. So the first reaction is, you just told me that an indie feature with a what by all means is basically a micro budget was ahead of schedule.
Yes,
and able to throw in scenes at the end of the day that were planned for later days with a cast solid enough to pull that off. And I also have to react that 3 days of rehearsal is good for a feature, but for the performances you got, I thought you were going to tell me, you know, oh, well, the good thing was we had like 3 months of rehearsal. Everyone was a stage actor, and like, you know, every Saturday I had a barbecue in the backyard, and then we all ate, and then we ran through the script. But like 3 days.
Well, I did have, you know, like I would say I had probably, on top of that, I had 3 more days with Sam, who plays Kevin, and then 2 more days with Ursula, who plays Krista. But other than that, no, it was like Sam and I are really good friends, so we would just hang out and run the lines and talk about stuff for like we did that for a few days during the year leading up, and Ursula showed up probably like 3 days before we started rehearsal. So we did a couple days of her and I chatting through things and stuff like that. But no, it was mostly like, in terms of those main, I guess, 5 actors, it was just those 3 days. So but that was huge because we could block everything. And, you know, I'd asked really early in the process, like, if you guys could show up to rehearsal with everything off book, like imagine like you're just showing up and you had to do it as a play right out of the gate, just come off book and the pressure will be off, because they were, of course, a little concerned with these like long take sort of situations. But yeah, I was really lucky that they were so dedicated too. Yeah,
For sure. Although, I mean, a stage actor should be able to handle someone who can do an hour and 15 minutes, maybe without an intermission, or even with intermission. I mean,
yeah.
2 40-minute acts with an intermission.
Oh, yeah.
They shouldn't be too afraid of a 7 to 10 minute take, right? I mean,
no, yeah. And the longest one we had, I think, was 4.5 minutes. That was the longest, and that was it. The rest of them were more shorter.
Yeah, actually, when you talk about your oneers, it's not like a Children of Men kind of stunt single take. They're all natural. It doesn't feel like we're sitting through a film where the director was flexing all the time. Look at my one. look how little I have to cut. You know?
Yeah, we were hoping that we wouldn't come off that way, because really our goal was, the rule that we set up was, we don't cut unless it's motivated, and as soon as it is motivated, we always cut. And that was the simple rule that we came up with, so that ideally all the cuts would feel, all right, that makes, like, as you're watching the film, you hopefully weren't seeing it too much or thinking about it too much, but it just made sense, hopefully. You know, and we did catch ourselves, you know, we're in the edit room going, we could have cut there and we didn't, but, you know, as you always do. But that was kind of the rule we set out with. Yeah.
And I mean, I think what you're expressing, it started from the beginning when you first read the play, is that there was respect for the material, even though you did the adaptation yourself with the playwright's help / approval. But yeah, there was just an immense respect for the material.
Yeah, Catherine was also like a huge help in the adaptation process, where I could just come to her and go, hey, what is this character going through in this moment? I'm not sure. I think it's this, but I'm not 100% certain. And she could say, well, this is where I was at. And I'd go, okay, well, great. What if I take that and put this little thing on it, because this is kind of how I understand it. And we could get to some sort of agreement and understanding. And one of the early gifts that she gave me was that I wrote the scenes on the bridge, early scenes with Kevin and Jamie. Those weren't in the play in that way exactly, and I kind of wrote a version of it with Merv coming by, and Catherine was like, well, why did you do it like that? And I said, well, you know, like the way that it works with Kevin is that if Merv makes fun of him and he's bullying him, then Kevin only wants to prove himself more. And I think from her perspective, you know, just me growing up as like a young kid in a lot of rural towns, I kind of got that, but as a young boy, right? But as growing up as a young girl in a rural town, it was sort of a different perspective for her. She didn't understand why Kevin would want to hang out with Merv or be friends with Merv. And that was when she said, okay, well, you've got to take those characters and just run with it, because I think you actually understand those guys better than I do. And that was a really good gift, because before then I was really restraining myself and holding back, and that just let me go away and write. And I think that was probably 4 months into the process that she said, you just got to go. And the next draft I did was way closer to what the movie ended up being. So yeah.
What a gracious playwright to
Yeah.
to say, to just instantly recognize that you have insight into youthful masculinity that she doesn't, and just to tell you to run with it. Because yeah, actually, I'm about to say like a virtue signaling kind of statement, but that's the world we live in. But yeah, I just sort of, it just clicked for me too that this is, the film is has incredible insight to like male toxic masculinity that leads to destruction of the earth.
Totally. And that's kind of how I always would, if someone say, what's the movie about? I'd say it's how about toxic ideals of masculinity going hand in hand with it destroying the earth. Like the way you said it, it's like, that's exactly how I'd always kind of pitch the theme of the film, and how this idea of like Jamie puts on this protective armor of toxic masculinity. He's like, all right, ready for battle in the community, essentially, because he is this sort of paradox. He's this really hard case kind of guy who's drinking and fighting all the time. But underneath that, he's actually maybe one of the more gentle, softer souls who, is going to go out and take care of these animals, right? And so, I mean, that's what always drew me to him. But that protective armor is exactly what cuts him off from the world. The protective armor of performative masculinity now cuts him off from the world. He can't talk to people, can't open up. And then we see how that affects Krista, his sister, and then especially Kevin, right? Like that, he basically teaches Kevin to do the things that he does in the film. And then Kevin deals with the consequences for them.
For sure, yeah, and Jamie is dealing with so much also as a big dude. I think we all know that. I mean, I'm actually 100% average sized. I'm 6 feet 190 or whatever. So it's like I just always avoided trouble. But all my friends who are like big dudes are like, you don't know the pressure that comes with being like a tall, thick guy. Like people come at you just because that. Whatever, that toxic thing of like, I'm going to take on the biggest guy in school so that people know I'm tough, and like, perfectly healthy guy, it's just toxic that people are coming at someone just because they're tall and tough looking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's kind of what happens with him. And then they all.
Yeah. And I mean, he uses it. He definitely, and it is, as much as I'm calling all the masculinity stuff, it can be toxic, but there's also, I always point out to people, the term toxic masculinity doesn't mean everything about masculinity is toxic. It just means there's parts of masculinity that are. But he also defends people who need defending and stuff. He actually does some really honorable stuff with masculinity as well. So
yeah, it's like you can see these parts of him that are gentler, that are like a caregiver of others, and unfortunately all the other parts, the parts that are toxic, infect all of those pieces that are good in him, and sort of turn it sort of in another direction. And that's kind of the sad part, I think, is that you see those gentle pieces being stripped away even more and more and more, and he's getting harder and harder and harder, and those sort of toxic traits are actually just becoming more and more a piece of him. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't think it's a spoiler to say his life has tragic elements.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a tragedy.
Yeah.
Was the animal stuff in the play? His connection to animals?
Yeah, it was a big part of the play, and it's really that sort of major metaphor throughout the play. Yeah, there's some great monologues in the play that, of course, we wouldn't do on the screen, but there's some great monologues in the play that are sort of centered around that. Yeah,
for sure. And God, what an amazing analogy for for humankind to say for a lead character to be destroying the habitat of animals while also clearly loving animals and trying to rescue those he can. Like that is actually the
Kind of where
human
we're at.
condition.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's complicated and messy. Yeah,
We
exactly.
love our videos. I only watch my social media at this point is just animal videos because I can't take the news or anything. And yet, I don't do that much in my life to try to protect their habitats and make sure that they don't disappear.
Yeah, we're in a tricky time. We're in a tricky time where it's like, how much can we? It's like we need to all take on so much to save the situation, but how much can we actually handle? And that's I think that's the tricky thing.
Yeah.
It's a weird time to live. That's for sure. Yeah.
It is, and we can't feign ignorance anymore, right? Like it used to. With the ideas 30, 40 years ago, people could just pretend that their gas stove in their home was like not causing any damage, and now you're like, actually, hey, I'll virtue signal again. We just changed our stove to like the induction thing that uses way less energy, and it is like, and it just honestly feels great.
Yeah.
But so the environmental message is by the way, for those listening to this who think it might be heavy-handed, it's totally subtext. It's all subtext. This is an incredibly unpreachy film.
Well, thanks. I'm glad that you feel that way. We were kind of hoping it would just sort of be in the environment. Alfonso Cuarón does that incredibly well in all of his movies. Hey, right? Like where it's like there's these political backgrounds, but they never really speak to them. They're just happening. And whenever I've got something that's sort of like sitting in my gut that I want to say or do in a story, I try to think about that. Is that okay? Well, what would Alfonso Cuarón do? He just sit it in the background and let it be present and not need to say much about it because the people are living the experience. It's like that great sort of quote. I can't remember what it's from, but about if you're writing about war, you don't write about the giant battle. You write about the burnt pair of shoes that are sitting by the side of the road. And I always kind of like that quote because it, one, was more budget friendly, but two, the small details or things that are universal that we understand.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, another key word you threw out is details. Your film gets all the details right, so that you don't have to do anything heavy-handed or you don't have to explain what's going on because there's authenticity to all the detail. All right, so now you've told me. I assume your shoot was basically 3 weeks, and then. Because of the long takes, was it a really fun editing room process? Did you love watching it come together, or were there some harrowing moments in the editing bay?
I wouldn't say there was ever like a harrowing moment, but it was really interesting because the movie came together so fast because of that, right? Like the early rough cuts came together incredibly fast, and we're already watching the movie, and learning all the things about it. Like it was pretty quick too to point out like, I guess that scene should go. It's not working. It's one shot. I guess there's no real like, well, I guess we could try to save this half of it. You could sometimes just chop a scene in half or something. But really a lot of the scenes weren't meant to live, as a whole. So that was really interesting. One of the things that we did discover early on, we cut a few scenes early in the film that we're like, oh, we actually don't need that. We kind of get everything without this little scene that seems to set something up. But actually we kind of get this. Was that the psychological landscape of Jamie wasn't kind of coming through exactly. And we found pretty early on the flashes to the clear cut and to the things underwater. And those were things that we started to develop the language for that and build that all in the edit. That wasn't scripted. That wasn't a prepared thing that we had ready. And that was really fun. That's when the harrowing moment, when you're like, why isn't this working? What do we need? And we started playing with that. That's when I took a deep breath in the edit, was when we found those sort of thematic strings to pull the movie together. Those were the things.
And I got to say, I'm going to compliment you again because, a lot of people love the smell of their own. And the fact that you were looking at the cut coming together and looking at scenes that you had shot and that you're probably on camera in, and to say, well, actually, that's redundant. We tell the same thing later on, or soon, close enough, so we'll just lose it. Like a lot. Well, with all those films I watch every year that get submitted, a lot of people let the redundancy come through just because they love everything, so good quality edit for someone who had not done a feature before. I think that shows a lot of skill and promise
Well, thanks.
that you
That's
spotted
kind.
the redundancies and said, I'm not going to make the audience. I'm not going to repeat myself.
Well, it's funny. I think it's easier to cut yourself out than other people. There was one scene that we had shot 16 takes of, and the actor had done like this work, and it was actually not their fault. They nailed it like take 2, take 3, but it was the scene later on in the film at this wedding, and there was all this stuff happening in the background that was sort of like telling a story, and that they had to like see and react to at the right moment, and everything just needed to line up. And we have like this ball of light sort of spinning, and I really wanted to like land at the right moment where it highlighted these characters as they came together in the background, and try to make it feel organic. And we did take 10, and I could tell they were getting frustrated. I'm like, it's okay, like it's gonna be great. And it was, as a scene alone, it was one of my favorite scenes, but we got in the edit and we had to cut it. And so I had to message them and be like, I'm so sorry, that thing that I tortured you with is not going to be in the movie.
Hey, that's par for the course. That's
exactly.
I think no actor expects to that everything they suffered through was for a reason, because you're suffering for the whole project anyway.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
You're suffering for the art.
Yeah.
And I imagine once you how long an edit was it?
It was 6 weeks to picture lock.
Wow, that's fast.
Yeah, it was really fast, and it was really like 4.5 weeks until we got to the fine cut, and we're going, all right, let's take a week off, come back to this and see what's up. And we did that, and then we worked on it for a few more days, and then we left it, and then we came back, because we were sending it off to making timelines for mix and color and this and that. We knew we were gonna have to wait. Like, we went from probably picture locking, end of the summer, to like doing our sound mix in November. So, and the color was around then too. It was late October, early November. So we knew we had a while. And so then we waited another 2 weeks. We came back, we watched it, and we thought, we like it. If we pull any strings now, I think we're going to start pulling the thread and it'll come undone. So we're just going to leave it. But it was pretty quick, because I think just because of the way that we shot it, there wasn't much more that we could do by the time we were done, in a weird way, oddly enough. Yeah.
For sure. And well, now I'm just going to fish for fun stories. But did your DOP Kevin, did he just love the footage that he got to see? Like, is he super proud? Because I mean, it just looks gorgeous for a low budget film. My God.
I think he is really proud. Like after we shot the film, he would joke about like, oh, we got to shoot every movie this way, right? Like, and so like, yeah, I think he was really proud. I think always there's a couple things that I know haunt him to this day that he's like, I learned from that, and this is how you do it now. And actually, my partner, her and I wrote a feature that she directed this spring. It was her first feature that I acted in, and there was a scene that was very similar. It was a very similar setup, not story wise, but in terms of like what they had to shoot and how they had to light it. And Kevin was like, I know how to do this now. I'm going to do it this way. And he did. It looks great, and you can see the faces better. And so other than that, I think he's super proud. And we went to Camera Mage, we competed at Camera Mage. And so I think that was big for him, because it's like, the world's leading cinematography festival. For him, that was like a pretty cool moment, and he definitely deserved it.
That's fantastic. And I assume the cast was happy? Did you have a little
so.
Did you hold like a cast screening, or?
We did, yeah. It was funny because we were just in this great pocket during COVID where it was like kind of in between two waves when we first premiered. And although it was all online, we had bubbles of 10. So we're allowed to have 10 people over. So we did 2 screenings of 10 and had some of the cast over who were still in town. And Yeah, I think they're really proud. They should be proud of themselves. They put a lot into it. But actors are funny. They always have a hard time watching themselves.
You made me laugh. The reason for my huge smile was you used the term bubbles of 10. And at the same festival that Bone Cage was at, we had a film from Canada called The Bubble about
Oh,
a
really?
woman, a hilarious comedian woman in Toronto who, like, no one wanted her in their bubble. Because
Oh,
for those who
no.
don't know, in Canada, like, everyone was told, all right, to deal with COVID, create a bubble of 10 people who you just expose yourself to just 9 others and don't go outside that bubble. And so you can have like a little sanity, unlike the countries like ours where everyone was like told, don't leave the house. So if
Right.
you lived alone, you were not happy.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know?
totally. Yeah.
Yeah, it was so yeah, I love hearing about the bubble.
Yeah, there's a lot of bubble talk.
So but I assume you shot the whole thing in 2019?
Yes, early summer 2019. Yeah.
Right, thank God. So before the plague hit.
Oh
So
yeah.
and then so the thing that sucked for you was you said you locked picture after 6 weeks and then sound was done by November. So
Yeah, it was I guess it was finished by end of December. Then we came around into the new year, started submitting to festivals, and then the pandemic.
and then all of a sudden a film that was meant to be watched in a theater full
Big
of
time.
people
Big time.
and it got shifted into this whole virtual thing that we all got stuck with for about a year and a half.
Yeah, Kevin and I had to laugh when it all happened because what else we were going to do? But we had to laugh because we had sat down the first meeting we ever had and said, okay, are we shooting this so that it can be watched on TVs at home or computers or even on your phone? And we both said, no, we're only shooting this for the theatrical experience. And ironically enough, neither of us have ever seen it on a big screen.
Son of a bitch. That is such a right. So
Pretty funny.
Oh man. Now I'm of course we had so many. All right. I hate the fact, I love the fact that we had your film at Sherman Oaks Film Festival last year, but it was virtual only with us, right? Because we didn't have enough theater time for all the. By the way, there was a huge flood of films once we were back in the theater. All the people who had held their films back, right? So yeah, you were from Nova Scotia, and you're like, okay, fine, I can't justify the Nova Scotia feature being in the theater.
Yeah.
But oh man, it makes me want to just like stamp my feet like a tantrum having child. That oh man, we could have had the theatrical premiere. Are you kidding me?
Well, it's funny because we were saying now that one day we're just going to rent out a theater here and just watch it, just like the main crew who made it, and just check it out for the first time.
I mean, I would
kind of fun
think
if we do that in like 2 years, where it's like nice and removed, and we've already hopefully made another movie altogether, and we can just watch it. Yeah.
Wouldn't like the whole city of Halifax like embrace this film? I mean, it's.
I think so. Yeah.
It's like a local. It's from the heart of the province, right? Is there like a Nova Scotia Film Festival that? Or a Halifax International Film Festival that, I mean, even though the film has had a festival run virtually, they should totally show it.
Yeah. I think I should talk to Mel, the producer, and we should make a plan. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Can't help it. And so were you staying busy afterwards? Or, I mean, as an actor and filmmaker, as your the two hats you switch back and forth. So the pandemic sucked serious ass. But
it's funny. It's like, August of 2020, people start shooting again here. So it wasn't too long until things were back up and running. They were just trickier. So oddly enough, I was working pretty well through all the pandemic, except for March to August of that year, and then after that, we premiered in September of 2020, and so then after that, things got quite busy in a different way than they were before. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. All right, so you weren't trapped inside just every once in a while logging on to watch your film virtual?
No, not it wasn't too bad. No, yeah.
Cool. So have you written? You said you just acted in something that your partner directed. Have you been writing stuff, or
Yeah.
are you more about adaptation, or this was just a unique thing?
It's funny. I don't think it was a unique thing, but I haven't really gone back to it in the same way. So since then, just like a week and a half ago, I released my first short form comedy series called King and Pawn. That's out, and it's out in Canada on this on Bell 5 TV1. It's a very, very small network, but it's like a 5 by 15-minute comedy series. So did that during the last while, and then
Is it sketch, or is it recurring characters?
it's recurring characters. It's kind of the best way to sort of explain it is it's kind of like a mix between like the Trailer Park Boys and Brooklyn Nine-Nine is like the two kind of worlds that it's like somewhere in between there. It's very like much like a like a like a new sort of version of what sitcom is, where it's it's obviously not like in a live audience sort of situation or anything like that. So it's more like sort of like look and feel like Arrested Development kind of sort of vibes. So we did that, and then and that we shot that last October.
And that you're writing and performing in, or?
Yeah, I was writing, acting, and directing on that with again a whole local crew and cast. So it was really fun just to do kind of like a straight comedy, just like that was really fun. But this last year, so right before the pandemic hit in like January 2020, I shot the first few minutes of my next feature, which is I'm in post on now. And that's called Look at Me, and it's based on a solo play that I did called Heavy, about my experience with eating disorders. And so I adapted my own play, which is kind of the funny thing. So my second feature is also an adaptation, just not of someone else's work. And then this last year, we got some more sort of public government funding for that feature, another micro budget. And we shot that in 5 sequences between July 2021 and March 2022. And so it's 5 sequences as I change in physical looks with her hair, weight, and also the seasons change. So I'm just in post on that now. So my second feature. So I don't know. Postal is a little different for this one because we really, the visual style is quite different. Even the tonal style is quite different. So there's a lot of experimenting in the filmmaking. It's sort of very, it breaks down the fourth wall a lot. So not in the sense that we talk to the camera, but like in just breaking the fourth wall in the filmmaking world. So it's I'm really excited about that one. I think Look at Me, this second feature of mine is my favorite thing and the thing I'm most excited about that I've ever made. So I'm excited to get that sort of wrapped up.
That's excellent to hear that, and that you're moving forward and making more. So I guess I didn't ask. Did Bone Cage get some kind of distribution in Canada, or because what I totally neglected to do with this podcast was to have you say right at the top where people can see it.
Yeah, so it's we got distribution in Canada with Level Film, which is a sort of like a distributor that tackles a lot of sort of indie Canadian features and emerging directors. And so right now it's still on VOD. It's available on VOD right now across Canada on basically anywhere that you can rent things, whether it's Cineplex or Apple or Amazon on Prime or whatever. So it's available to rent anywhere kind of in Canada. We don't have any US distribution still yet, but we just never kind of landed with someone in the long run.
Son of a gun. Well, yeah. God, you should just be on Prime Video Direct in the US.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's really hard for non-horror to get distributed in this south of Canada, but man, it's so good. So I'll whatever. I planted a seed. Hopefully you just
that's a great seed.
Throw it up there. Well, that's good. And I'm sure am I wrong to think that the Canadian response would be good?
Yeah, we were really happy in the end that people connected with it. I think a lot of people could just see their hometowns or people they knew. Like the thing that I would get most was messages from people going, "Oh yeah, like that reminds me just of like this guy that I knew when I was growing up, or just like this woman that I knew when I was growing up." And they were like this, and this is where they're at now. And I'd get these messages of these people's like mini life stories, because oddly enough, that was the biggest response we got, was just like these little stories of people's lives that were similar to the lives of the characters.
More back up to the authenticity thing, right? So
yeah, that was kind of cool. Yeah.
Well, excellent. All right, so VOD in Canada, people, that'd be fun. So next time I visit my best friend in Vancouver, I'll say, all right, we're gonna sit down and watch a movie. I'll pay the rental fee.
Funny. That's great.
But cool. Anything else you want to mention before we wrap it up?
No, thanks for this chat. It was really great to get to talk about the film again. It's been a minute, and yeah, it's really kind of you.
Yeah, it has. And what can I say? This podcast makes up. I know. I don't even remember why we didn't get a chance to do a Q&A, a virtual one last November. But
I think. Was it? If it was early November, it was because I was shooting the digital series. I was shooting King and Pawn. I remember that now. It was like right when we were shooting. That's.
Yeah, you didn't have time. Yeah, and honestly, I get it. No worries. It made this chat a little better, because I admit I'm not a total pro. So if we'd already done a half-hour chat before, like sometimes I just leave that stuff out because it's old to me, but it would not be old to people listening to this. So fair enough.
Well, thank you for this. It's great. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you. What can I say? A film that pulls in 4 grand jury awards, and, super proud to have it, be part of Sherman Oaks Film Festival, which is, sort of my baby. I'm indie films is our focus. So when there is a great independently made film, that's this good, it just makes my life like, that's what I'm in it for. So I appreciate
awesome.
you submitting it. That was great. And is there a website or social media that people should check out if they want to see all your stuff?
Yeah.
Especially I'm so glad to hear that you're doing comedy too, because balance you out. You hit so heavy with Bone Cage.
I have an equal love for both drama and comedy, so it's nice when I get to do both. I would say like now, even more than before, I do probably a 50-50 split now, which is nice. Yeah.
Very cool.
So I would say people check things out. There's Instagram, Twitter at Bone Cage Film. You can check that out, and be able to, if you're in Canada, just click on that link. You'll be able to find any link to watch the film pretty easily there.
For sure. And if someone just wants to follow you, do you have your own Instagram, or do you?
Yeah. Instagram's Taylor CP Olson. And my Twitter is Taylor Olson 1993. And that's, you can find me there. Yeah.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, Olson is OLSON.
Yes, right.
Not an EN. I'm not sure what Scandinavian country that means, but hey.
I think it's Danish, I don't know.
Danish. Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Taylor. I'll do my little housekeeping at the end here. Of course, we were just talking about Bone Cage and Taylor and his career, so try to see Bone Cage any way you can. I don't know, fly to Canada and or wait for me to talk him into like letting me throw it up on Prime Video Direct and just whatever, because man, this film needs to be seen. All right, so I mentioned film festivals and stuff, but actually the first thing I should say is like and subscribe to the podcast. If you're still listening, thank you for listening. And doesn't hurt to doesn't cost you anything to click like and to subscribe or do something nice. This Discover Indie Film podcast does have a companion TV series that goes with it. Whenever shorts are on this podcast, when that filmmaker of the shorts, basically Discover Indie Film is on Amazon Prime Video, and it's just an anthology of like the best shorts on the festival circuit. So if you dig indie film, go to Amazon Prime Video and search for Discover Indie Film and enjoy. We used to be free included with Prime. Now you got to pay because Amazon didn't like when we got to like 10,000 viewers a week, and they were like, I get it. It's their servers, right? $10,000 a week. They were like having to send us a whopping like $20 a month. So they're like, no, we want to charge people money and then take half of it instead of just let people watch your TV series. Fair enough. If I had the infrastructure, maybe I'd be the same guy. But anyhow, if you want to learn about that or this podcast, just go to discoveryindiefilm.com, and on social media, it's at DIAFwins. We mentioned that Bone Cage cleaned up 4 awards at the Sherman Oaks Film Festival. That's held every November here in LA. You can learn more at ShermanOaksFF.com, and it's at ShermanOaksFF on social media. It just so happens I program a second festival called Film Invasion Los Angeles. That's every June. You can learn about it at filminvasionla.com, and it's at filminvasionla on social media. And hey, I think my spiel's done. The next podcast in the Discover Indie Film feed will be Taylor answering the 4 questions. The Discover Indie Film 4 questions are favorite films, underrated, overrated, and something no one's heard of that they should watch. So listen to the next one if you're listening to this and the next one hasn't come out yet, or wait for the next one. So thank you, Taylor.
No, thank you. Thanks for having me.
And thank you, everyone, for listening.